Okay, well then let's go ahead and get started with today's last session. We are already at the end of our training seminar together on the church and the migration crisis. We've gone through the biblical and theological foundations of migration. We have also explored the historical and the legal backgrounds in regards to immigration. And for this last section, we wanted to make an important focus on how ourselves as pastors and as ministers can begin to respond to the crisis in ways that are positive and proactive. And what Alejandra and I have attempted to do and are attempting to do is to provide you with some practical solutions of what you can do with the information that you've received this during this session. Again, what we are sharing is in no way comprehensive. There is much more work to be done in this area, but we want to encourage each and every one of you to consider these things and how you can begin to play a role in addressing the migration crisis within your local church and within your local communities as well. So a couple of the guiding questions that'll lead this discussion, and some of it is similar to what we've been discussing already earlier during or in this last section is how can ministers and church leaders provide ministerial care to immigrants in their local communities and in their local church and their communities, as well as what are some practical resources that can be utilized to support our congregation. So these are kind of the ideas that we want to put forth to you during this time. And there's five particular ideas that I want to put forth for us to consider. One is changing the narrative, to equip through education, to explore the possibility of church immigration ministries, to consider what it means to start an immigration resource center, and to partner with other nonprofit organizations. This is something that we actually spoke about a little bit in the last section, and then I wanted to help elaborate on it as well. So the first idea is to change the narrative. Someone's asking to go to the previous slide, so it is this one. These slides will be made available as well. So if you're taking notes, just know that you're going to receive them um, in the next few days through email. So to change the narrative means to abstain from derogatory and dehumanizing rhetoric and to affirm the dignity of immigrants and immigrant communities as image bearers of God. To change the narrative is something that is very important in our day because so much of the narrative that we see in popular society is highly politicized, is often hostile, is not constructive in any way, in many ways, and this it contributes to a lot of the, in a sense, stoppages, a lot of the getting stuck in these conversations, people speaking blindly to one another, not and speaking within their own echo chambers and not being able to have constructive conversations with one another. So part of the work in doing this, part of the work in moving forward is to learn what it means to speak about immigration, to speak about the crisis in a higher way, in a Christ-like way. What does it mean to see the image of God within all people and to affirm that image within that person and to call that image out from people, to live and to draw closer to Christ in that way? Do we see people as people who are made in the image of God, or do we see them in other ways? And it's important for us to consider this in changing the narrative. There's a quote here that was written in an article by Dr. Daniel Grudy, and this was written by an immigrant that came from Central America. It was originally in Spanish, but it's here in English, and it says, "I have stowed away in baggage compartments of buses and almost suffocated in a boxcar. I almost froze to death in the mountains and baked to death in the deserts. I have gone without food and water for days and nearly died on various occasions. As difficult as these are, they are not the hardest part of being a migrant. The worst is when people treat you like you're a dog, like the lowest form of life on the earth. This this quote comes from somebody who's gone through the migrant experience, through the difficulties that come from the treacheries of migration, and to begin to transform the way in which we speak about it can really help us move forward in positive and proactive ways with this conversation. So I wanted to briefly just share a couple of ideas with you of terms that we should consider to use and terms that we should consider to not use when talking about immigrants. What type of language do we want to stay away from? Some terms not to use. Um, Again, we've talked about this dichotomy of legal versus illegal, referring to a human being as an illegal immigrant is something that is dehumanizing. It is something that that does not affirm the image of God within that other human being. And what is happening is that when people refer to others in that way, they are defining them according to a particular action rather than who they are in their personhood and their essence. I've heard it said before that um, if that I'm sure many of us have maybe gotten a ticket before, maybe some of us have ran a red light. We've done something that's in a sense broken the law, and to be held to that for the rest of one's lives and to be defined by that is something that no human being deserves to be held by. This is something that is not helpful or in any type of way. And what we should seek for is restitution. We should seek for restoration. We should seek other ways to help people in this way. Another term to not use is alien. Uh, and the reason many times when we speak about immigrants, and often in many legal documents, this was something that was recently changed, but there's the language of alien, and when you call someone an alien, what you're saying is that they're not human. Because when we think of aliens, we think of people who come from outer space, people who are not like us. There's this type of outsider mentality, this type of foreignness, and this type of this dehumanization that comes with it. So to move away from this language is to begin to construct better conversations on immigration. And then there's historic terms that have been used in the past, such as wetback. This is a term that should not be used in any type of way. This goes into more crass and other language that just should not be used. Because in doing so, again, it is not helpful in any way. There's other terms that are often used in media, I mean, such as invasion, um, those types of words that are often politically charged and hostile and promote language that promotes fear is something that often is not helpful. Terms to consider using documented versus undocumented. Other formal terms, migrant, immigrant, as we've learned during this class, refugee, asylum seeker, and somebody who is displaced. This term, displaced, is often used of somebody who resides in a country that experiences political turmoil. And as a result of that, they either lose their citizenship in the process of turmoil, or they're forced to leave that country in the midst of that, and they become displaced because they lack this type of citizenship. And when you study the area of political philosophy, one of the things that is considered a basic human right is the right to belong, the right to belong to a community, to have membership is something that is fundamental to the human experience because it is from that right that all other rights really hinge on. If a person is not a member, a member of a political community. They do not have access to healthcare. They do not have access to banking systems. They do not have access to government assistance. They do not have access to apply for a loan or so many different things that are excluded just from that one idea of membership. So this is something that we should consider as well. And a quote here from Dr. Daniel Grudy that helps us understand this idea of the image of God. Defining all people in terms of their likeness to God provides a very different starting point for the discourse on migration and creates a very different trajectory for a discussion that commonly uses labels from a socio-political sphere, or worse, the degrading stereotypes used by nativist groups. So again, in having conversations about immigration and having conversations about migration, it is important to speak of all people as image bearers of God, as people who God loves, who God cares for, whom Christ died for. And if this is how Christ sees humanity, sees his people, this is as well the heart that we should have towards all people. Again, not just the right belief, not just the right action, but also the right passion. Our orthodoxy, our orthopraxy, our orthopathy must be aligned with one another. These three things must be consistent, must be coherent with the biblical ethic in which Christ calls us to. Another idea that I'd like for us to consider is to equip through education. To equip through education means to provide educational opportunities for pastors and church leaders to be equipped to respond to the migration crisis from a biblical, theological, historical, legal, pastoral, and ministerial perspective. Now, this might sound very familiar because this is what we have been attempting to do here in this very class today. And this is not something that stops here, but it is something that we hope can continue, that can continue to happen within your local churches, within your local congregations, by attending this seminar, by receiving these types of resources. You yourselves have the opportunities to go back to your congregations, to go back to your communities, and to begin to do this type of work with them, with pastors, with church leaders, with congregants, with lay members of your church. You have the opportunity to begin to disciple people within your congregations to understand what the Bible says, what Scripture says about migration, and how that should inform the way in which we see those who exist among us. Some very practical ways, and this is where we're getting into some practical resources for you. One thing that you could do is you could start a small group book club, and doing this is just to host a book club with a small group at your church. Something that is a very simple first step. If you don't know where to begin, if maybe reaching for the stars and starting something that requires to uplift your entire life. If moving to the mission field right now is not in the picture for you, this is a very simple step that you could take of something like a book club. And I have some great options for you here. There's a book here called Christians at the Border by Dr. Daniel Carroll Rodas. This is really one of the first books that came out that began to comprehensively speak about how Christians should view and understand these issues. Listen to the Children, Escuchamos a los Niños, is a book that is written by Dr. Elizabeth Gonda Fraser. This is an excellent resource for you as well. Welcoming the Stranger is a book that was written by World Relief, and there it provides a very comprehensive understanding, not only from a Christian perspective, but also goes over historical, legal, many different components, many different lenses in which you can begin to understand the migration crisis and how the church should respond. The God Who Sees is a book that recently came out. It's called The God Who Sees: Immigrants, the Bible, and the Journey to Belong. And this is an excellent book because it actually highlights many of the women in Scripture who were immigrants, who went through the immigrant experience, and what God's posture was towards these women. I think this is a great resource for all of you to consider. And then finally, a book that recently came out, Brown Church, by Dr. Robert Chattelmetal. And if you're interested in knowing kind of more the historical, the ways in which the evangelical church, the Hispanic Latino church, has been involved in this type of work over the past 500 years, this is an excellent resource for you to consider as well. Another area in which you can explore is small group Bible studies. If this is slightly different from a book club, but book that particularly speaks about what the Bible says on immigration, and I have a few resources for you to consider here as well. There's a couple here from World Relief, Discovering and Living God's Heart for Immigrants. The Evangelical Immigration Table has this resource called Church Leaders Guide to Immigration. This is something that you can use. There's actually a 3-day devotional that recently came out called You Took Me In, Developing a Biblical View on Immigration. And then actually there are 2 denominational resources, one that is actually from the Mennonite Network called Immigration in the Bible, and one that was written by Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, and this is called Be Not Afraid. They're denominations who've actually worked to develop curriculum, and I would love to see something like this developed within our own denomination as well, to begin to teach within our local communities. From a Pentecostal perspective, I think this would be something that is beautiful. Something else that you can explore is to do a sermon series. You can preach a sermon or a sermon series on the Bible and immigration. And I've provided 2 resources for you here to consider. One is from the Evangelical Immigration Table, and the other one is by Sojourners. The first one, Evangelical Immigration Table, if you go to their website, we've mentioned them several times, but this is an excellent organization. They actually have a section on their website where they have several sermons as well as sermon outlines in which you can look to. You can listen to many of the sermons that they have there and see kind of the sermon outlines that they've created to begin to serve as a resource to you as you begin to explore this topic. And Sojourners actually recently, this is another online website, they recently released a resource of 100 sermons on immigration. This came out, I think a couple months ago. Actually, I think it was even last month. They have over 100 sermons from different people from different Christian denominations on immigration, and you can actually go and listen to these things, and they'll help in that way. Another thing to consider is training seminars. This is a 1 to 2 day. You can host something like what we're doing here, a 1 to 2 day workshop. This will be hosted again next year. We hope to do this every year to continue to train pastors and leaders within the Church of God as well as outside of the Church of God with these types of resources. So this is something that's available to you. Also, there's an excellent program that I've gone through myself through the Center for Latino Studies, or for the Centro Latino at Fuller Theological Seminary. They're offering a certificate or a diploma in the church's response to the immigration crisis. This is something that is an excellent, I've gone through this program myself, and it's a really good resource. It's a much longer program than the one that we're offering. Theirs is 6 months, so it is a much longer commitment. Whereas this one, the one that we did is only 2 days. So a 2-day seminar versus a 6-month seminar, it is much more robust. There is much more content to be pulled from that. And something that you can do yourself as well is to explore what does it look like to host your own training seminar within your local church community. You can call upon maybe different leaders within your particular regions. You can see if there are immigration lawyers in your regions, if there's maybe scholars or theologians that have done work in this area, bring them to your church to speak to them on this topic. Even doing things with your districts or with your regions is something that would be good to explore. So training seminars is another great opportunity for you to explore. Another thing that we can explore to do as 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 ministers and to care for immigrant communities is to start immigration ministries within our local churches. What does it mean to start that? To establish immigration ministries in your local church, to welcome new members, to host events, and to provide care for their immediate needs. We talked about when people, many times there's this type of isolation that takes place and certain types of resources are just unknown or not made available. And what would it look like for this type of ministry to point people in those directions or to provide them with those resources themselves? um, these types of ministries can also begin to plan mission trips at the border. I know that Alma was talking about the need to connect with organizations who are doing this type of work at the border, and to have this type of immigration ministry can work simultaneously with maybe the missions ministry at the church, and find ways in which they can work and collaborate together. Let's get creative here, folks. Let's think about how we can really begin to do new things, to be creative in the work that we're doing. Hosting things like immigration fairs where you invite other ministries, other organizations to come and to provide resources to your church, of where people don't necessarily know where to go. Have those things come to the church and provide this type of information. Um, of course, with the nature of an immigration ministry, confidentiality is something that is very important. So if this is something that you feel called to, I think this is something, of course, that you would need to speak with your pastor about and find what is the best way to protect those if somebody does express that they are undocumented. How do you make sure that you hold people's lives, you hold information that people give with wisdom, and proceed in a manner um, that is wise. I think this is something important to consider. Another thing that we can explore is to start an immigration resource center within the local church context. So establish faith-based, nonprofit immigration resource centers to provide legal information and social services for a local community. This is slightly different than an immigration ministry, because an immigration ministry is done more within the context of ministers within the church. But to take this next step of starting an immigration resource center, is to begin to explore these more legal avenues of the church. And I think it's been mentioned here how much of a necessity this is for the local church, that we need to have these types of resources available to them. And I've listed 3 different organizations that are actively doing this work. One being, and the first 2 are actually in the New England area. The second one is in California. The first one is called Open Door Immigration Services. Another one is called Agencia Alpha, and another one is called Immigrant Hope. These types of resource centers often offer immigration advice and consultations, oftentimes for free, citizenship application assistance, citizenship classes. These things are offered at the church. Interpretation and translation services, ESL classes, immigration fairs, as I had mentioned in the last section, and counseling services. These are opportunities that these types of centers offer. And being and having the resources and having somebody who would dedicate themselves to do this within the church is something that is desperately needed. And if it's not something that can be created maybe at the local church level, maybe it can be explored at the regional level. What does it look like to start an immigration resource center for your region, and that center serve all of the churches in your area? I wanted to mention here, I had briefly mentioned counseling, and And Alejandra had spoken about this recently, but there's actually um, this the necessity. We see the necessity for counseling here through this document, through this what do you call this? Through this Venn diagram of the risk in which many children face in their developmental process, depending on their parent status. We see here for parents who are authorized, who are documented in the United States, these students tend to have a higher success rate in many ways. They have access to social services for child and family, and we see some of the things they have available is government subsidized jobs, social security benefits, unemployment benefits. They usually enroll into Head Start preschool programs, and they have subsidies for childcare. For parents who are unauthorized to exist in the United States, they are more prone to more dangerous social factors. They usually only have access to protective factors of social services such as Medicaid for a child, WIC, food stamps, and reduced cost lunches. Uh, in regards to mental health, they usually experience anxiety. They tend to have lower reading, spelling, and math skills. They tend to enroll in, into early childhood and preschool programs. They have less social support, and their parents have more job-related stress and economic instability. And As far as other risks, there's fear of separation, fear of deportation, discrimination, stigmas of being an immigrant. They tend to conflate an immigrant with undocumented. They tend to see ICE as the police. There's a fear of ICE, um, and they experience high cortisol levels due to discrimination. These are realities that happen within children. And then unauthorized parents who have been affected by either detention centers or deportation, these children experience higher risks. So, in regards to mental health, they tend to have PTSD symptoms, depression symptoms, uh, poor functioning. They usually have low school behavior and higher conduct problems. They have housing insecurity, economic instability. They change from two parent homes often to a single mother home, changes in daily routines, and poor just parental relationships. They are much more prone to these types of risks. This is what children go through, and honestly, I think one of the things that we will need to reconcile is all of the children that have been detained at the detention centers over the past several years. Uh, we have yet to reap the consequences of what this will do to their emotional and social well-being in the next decade, in the next 50 years, and the impact that this is going to have on our society, on our communities, on our economy. These types of traumas that these children are going through, we have yet to see the consequences, and they will be drastic, and we will have to realize how to deal with them when the time comes. A final thing that I would consider, that I like to invite for you guys to consider, is something that we've already mentioned here before, is to partner with local organizations, to build networks with trustworthy nonprofit organizations, with lawyers, with legal consulting agencies to provide aid for documented and undocumented immigrants. Maybe you're not in a position to where you can start an immigration resource center within your church or within your region, but something that you can do is partner with those who are doing this work. And I'm sure in the state in which you exist in, there are many different resources that you can begin to get into contact with, build relationships with. And when people within your community are in need, to know where to send them, to know how to help them get the resources that they need. This is something that all of us can do with just a little bit of research. If we spent an afternoon, maybe a weekend, doing this type of research and reaching out to these organizations, a lot of opportunities can come from this for our local congregations. It's important as well that these organizations be trustworthy, that they have a good track record. There's been many reports over time of immigrants whose money has been stolen, who have been exploited, who have given their money to lawyers, and the lawyers have disappeared or just not provided them with the assistance that they need. So finding trustworthy organizations is important. And I mean, I could list organizations. However, I think I think it's important for us to do this work within our local communities. And I think on this very call, in this very call itself, there are people who are doing this type of work who are nonprofit organizations. I think of Alma here, who's doing her ministry with Practice Mercy. I think of Hilda here, who's doing her work with Vida Plena, Corazón Contento, in Sonora, Mexico. These people are doing work, and building relationships with them is something that we should do. So the way in which I'd like to end this part of the session before entering into Q&A is that if you yourself run a nonprofit organization and are doing this type of work within your communities, if you could please just share your information in the chat at this time. And we've given an example here in the section just to model it. Just write the organization, your name, an email address in which people can contact you. I ask for you, if you lead a nonprofit organization or some type of social ministry that ministers to immigrant communities, please provide us with this information so that everybody on this call can have a starting point, can have a place where they can begin to reach out to. And people here on the call, I invite you to reach out to these people on this call and find ways in which you can support them in the work that they're doing. These are just some ways in which we can provide ministerial care to our immigrant communities. This list is in no means comprehensive. There is still so much more work that we can do, and when we split up into our small groups, we'll have the opportunity to explore that further. But I hope that this serves as a challenge to you to begin to think about how you can begin to positively and proactively serve your immigrant communities within your local context. So at this time, we have a few minutes. We will open it up for questions.
Hey, Daniel, can I just share something quick?
Yes.
Just another idea that comes to mind, and we're not doing this through any, we're doing this as a family. I'm thinking that churches can do this also. For example, my wife works in the school system here in Cleveland, Tennessee. And the school district that we work, specifically the school where she works, has a high number of Latino students. Talking about that specific community, it could be other minorities, but that specific community. And we found out that a lot of these kids, when they go back home at 3:30, when they leave school, they have no parents home because their parents are working, right? So, a lot of them are single parents, right? A lot of these kids, those who have any family here, are with single parents who make it from the border to our different states. And one of the things we have done is to open our house from 3:30 to, maybe at times at 9:30, 10, to have them home and feed them and help them with their homework, right? There's much that we can do. We bring, there's 3 of them that come. But we're trying to do something through our church and have a bigger, bigger support group to have it. I know we have boys and girls clubs and all that stuff. But there's something about, them finding homes that can do that, right? My wife and I, we always have planned to adopt and to do foster care. It has not happened yet, but this is a great way for us to care for our, children that they would have been the whole day. I mean, before that, they spend the whole day by themselves, right? And some of the stories we had, one is this girl, when we started bringing her home, she was 7. And she lived in a house where 4 rooms were rented, and she was the only girl among 12 people. So just imagine that, a 7-year-old living with men, adult men, right? And by the time she got home at 3:30, she was there by themselves. Some of them were family members, but we couldn't, we just couldn't stay put with that, right? So we brought her home and stayed with her until her dad got back from work. So, I mean, there's, like you said, there's so many complex things, like you were saying, and even Alejandra, but also there's so, like small things that we can do that we might be able to work, and if we know school system people and all that, to work that way. So I just wanted to put that out there.
That is a beautiful, and that is an excellent example of just a very practical way in which so many of us can begin to do this type of work within our communities. And when we split into our small group discussions in a little bit, we'll have opportunities to begin to think about and brainstorm together more ways in which we can begin to do this type of way. But thank you for providing that amazing example. Any other questions during this time? We have maybe about 8 minutes left before splitting into the next section. Feel free to write it in the chat section or raise your hand as well. I saw that there was a question earlier in regards to what is Sojourners. Sojourners is an online magazine it's an online magazine that provides many different resources in regards to immigration. They have other things as well, but they recently posted 100 sermons on immigration from many different traditions, many different Christian traditions. So all you would need to do is go online, write Sojourners 100 sermons on immigration, and you would find a whole list of resources available to you for that. So yeah, any other questions? Yes, Alma. We'll go ahead and unmute you right now.
Yes, are you? I think I saw you saying that that you, hopefully you and Alejandra are willing or able, or Wilmer or whoever is your team, can participate in Bible colleges or seminaries, or if we can condense this to like a one-day seminar. Are you guys able to do that? Are you considering to do that to other denominations or Bible colleges or things like that?
I can respond to that quickly. As part of the Center for Latino Studies, one of the things that we want to do is to close the gap. Like I think Palma was saying, and we want to do that in different ways and at different levels. So maybe this is more complex level today seminar with people that can do this. But yes, we're more than willing to bring this together, and and you can contact me or do it through Danielle, and then whatever we need to put together, we can do that, and definitely we can do one-day trainings, and we can do it at many different levels. And that's where there's a lot going on up through the center, right? And we'll do this no cost, as much as we can, right? The center is here to serve the community. And actually, we can say much of what you're doing to, paying the fee here is not only for the certificates, to give some, offerings to the translators. That's a lot of work, right? We want them to feel that they are being blessed through that. So, and the rest is going to be covered by my office. And we had a grant that's going to take care of a lot of other stuff. So yes, we're more than willing to do that, to travel whenever it's open to travel, for some places. And Danielle, if you go ahead, I know Danielle is more occupied because Daniel is a PhD student. That's why it took us a whole year to do this, right? We needed him to finish his semester because he's committed. But through the center and whatever he can do from away, I'm more than what than available to do anything you can need us to do. I'll put my information in the chat if you need it, both Spanish or English. I can do any of them, and we can do any of them.
We need to clone Daniel, and we need to clone Alejandra, and we need to clone Wilmer, right? For each of our little places that we are, because this is the time in history that we need to be doing this, and I'm thinking like my part of the border is called the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, this part of the Texas border. For the first time in our history, we have the first English speaking accredited Bible college and seminary. So I'm going to be speaking with the professor who is in charge of the director for the bachelor's program. and bring you. In this case, I think one of you guys needs to come, and then we can have Daniel on Zoom or something. But I need we need one human present, so they can approach and all of that, and how much needed in education. Like for instance, the irony of my border, very influential churches, all denominations, take mission trip to Guatemala and Honduras, but English speakers. But no one goes to Reynosa, where we have hundreds of Guatemalans and hundreds of Hondurans. So we are seeing that here in this border, So I'm just trying to brainstorm already and see how can we multiply this, around. We need to slay this dragon, ugly dragon of immigration, dysfunctionality in America, and we need all of us and more people, so we can change the narrative. We can educate our people. Evangelicals are very, very late to this game in immigration. And it's time. It's a high time that we do this. So thank you so much. And thank you for your work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alma. Um, Something else that I wanted to share. It's I think I lost what I was going to share. Yeah, I don't remember what I was going to say. But yes, me, Alejandra, Wilmer, we're more than happy to be resources, however way in that we can. And my hope is that after this training, each and every person who's gone through this training feels called and feels qualified to begin to do this type of work within your local church communities as well. The reason in which we offer this training is really to empower you to begin to think about how can you begin to have this conversation. How do you have the tools, the resources within your local church context? And I'll be sharing a little bit more about what the Church of God Migration Crisis Initiative is trying to do at the end of the call when we speak about next steps. Um, but for now, of course, myself, Wilmer, Alejandra are resources, however ways in which we can. And some of us have certain commitments during the year. I'm not allowed to work during my PhD program because that's part of like my commitment to the university. So unfortunately, I can't do as much during that time. But during summertime, I want to commit myself to this however way in which I can. And we will be offering this seminar again next year for other people who are interested. But my hope is that each and every one of you feels empowered to begin this conversation within your communities and to begin to serve your immigrant community as well and be qualified through this program. So I believe that is all the time that we have for now. Thank you all so much. You guys have hung in there. You guys have done so good over the past, I think, now 7 hours and 15 minutes of this seminar. We're almost at the end. We want to give you the opportunity to go one more time into small groups. We're giving you some questions as well so that you can discuss them together in your groups. Those will be sent in the chat shortly. And from there, we will send you into your breakout sessions. So